one of the most growing trends within the spirit of this age is to call those who are going through a spiritual awakening a chosen one. So today I'm going to deconstruct this psychological operation of being a chosen one. In my video, The Timeline Split Explained, I talk about how there is an ascending timeline, and with that, the implication as though there is more conscious individuals and a more conscious impulse within those who wish to spiritually evolve. That is as far as this concept goes with being advanced. There is nothing beyond this concept of souls and people who wish to spiritually evolve. What I mean by that is there's nothing that makes them more superior. They are more advanced. That's just the reality of the situation. But being more advanced in consciousness or going through a spiritual awakening and becoming more expanded in our consciousness does not at all mean that we are chosen. As a matter of fact, this is a psychological operation, otherwise known as a psyops, that has been infused intentionally into the spiritual community in order to appeal to our ego. This was infused into the spiritual community by the entity that we know as Yahweh. So we see this stronghold when it comes to religion and when it comes to spirituality, and there being some common themes of manipulation and of consciousness tactics that are used to control a person who's evolving consciousness. So this is most known in the spiritual meme, new level, new devil. There's always going to be, every time you up-level your consciousness, some new way that manipulation mutates. Some new way that the manipulation tactics can appeal to our new state of consciousness. It never stops. No matter how much we expand our consciousness, no matter how much we grow and evolve, there's always going to be waiting for us at that new level some form of manipulation tactic. And so what we see, which is very strong in the spiritual community and even the conscious community today, is that same psyops that was placed by the Yahweh entity far back into creating a sense of specialness and appealing to the ego of certain races here on earth being chosen. And it's still that same flavor of manipulation by that same entity, only now it looks completely different because it's not under a religious tone this time. It's being put in a spiritual setting. It's being placed in the spiritual community as a way to infuse our consciousness with being special. Now, everyone is special because we're all inherently unique. You can watch my video on this titled, Are We the Creator or the Created? So, when a being hasn't been able to understand the larger paradox of existence, we can fall into a superiority complex or an inferiority complex, because the ego always needs to be either in a state of superiority or inferiority. See, we typically only know when the ego is in a superiority complex. It's way harder for our discernment to recognize when the ego is in an inferiority complex. But it's just as much egoic to be in an inferiority complex as it is in a superiority complex. And so when we're in an inferiority complex, that's when religion and that's when a lot of different spiritual beliefs start being infused into the collective mind to keep us in a state of inferiority so we could be fed off of and our sovereignty can be siphoned. But there's just as much manipulation going on the opposite end of this equation to feed our spiritual ego, to feed our sense of superiority, to feed our spiritual ego into believing that we are superior and that we are special for going through a spiritual awakening. And that is not any more well-known or seen than in this chosen one concept that the spiritual community is now facing. Because there are so many people who are going through a spiritual awakening right now, and then they're consuming content that is feeding their spiritual ego, actually blocking their own evolution by putting them in a false paradigm, putting them in a mental matrix, as though they're in some sort of chosen one group selected by the same Yahweh entity, only now the Yahweh entity is very aware that religion is something that the human consciousness is evolving out of. It can no longer control the human consciousness and the spiritual consciousness through that programming anymore. So it's mutating. It's taking form into the spiritual community now, and it's playing off of the same manipulation tactic, only now it's placing people who are going through genuine awakenings, people who are going through genuine evolutionary milestones, but it's making them go through a mental matrix so that they actually do a U-turn back into the matrix control system. Psyops make a person believe that they are a part of a genuine movement, when in reality, they are being mind controlled to focus their life force and consciousness into a trap. This keeps people following false movements that do not actually raise a person's frequency, but it gives the illusion as though the person's frequency is becoming higher, and it feeds this illusion in several ways. Each psyops is different, so the way it creates the illusion of awakening will be different depending on what community they are targeting. It will be different for the right than it will be for the left, and so forth. Psyops are all custom made to fit perfectly into a person's belief systems. Now, even though this is a psyops that was infused intentionally into the spiritual community to block our evolution, there are so many different content creators or new age teachers that have actually taken on this concept and this psyops and are feeding it now like a prostitute archetype to their followers, to their audience. They're spreading this psyops because they're benefiting from it in some way. They're either benefiting from it monetarily, they're benefiting from it through gain, through reach, through following, whatever it is. There are shadow reasons why content creators are purposely helping to perpetuate this. There are 100% out of integrity, 100% out of alignment reasons why content creators are feeding this to their audience, feeding this storyline of them being chosen, of the chosen one, whole little narrative that actually severely harms people who are going through a spiritual awakening. Now, one could say, well, it's a rite of passage to go through these, tests. It's how we gain discernment. Absolutely true. We always learn discernment through personal life experiences. None of us will be spared by learning discernment through our own personal life experiences. Nothing can really come and intervene to stop us from learning experiences through our life. We can be helped, we can be given advice, we can be given keys and markers along the way, but nothing can truly intervene and stop us from learning these things unless we go through it. So in that sense, yes, this is a great rite of passage that many people are learning how to discern and how to evolve through. But at the same time, there are several people who are going through a spiritual awakening, and now it's being capitalized off and commercialized off through this psyops of them being chosen ones. Because there is a new earth that awaits the conscious collective, the collective of people who are going through their own healing, who are going through their own advancement in consciousness. But that new earth is not one how you get there, either mentally, emotionally, whatever. You don't picture that new earth. You don't align with that timeline of that new earth by believing that you are a chosen one, because that very concept of being a chosen one leads with its own terminology. It leads with its own language and therefore mental constructs that are actually going to vibrationally make you not a match to a new earth. It will make you a match to manipulation tactics and recycle you into the matrix control system. In my video, What is the False Light? I talk about how the false light system here on Earth doesn't actually care which side of the polarity that you fall under. So in this sense, it doesn't matter if the false light gets you into its inferiority complex of your ego, and it doesn't matter if the false light gets you into your superiority complex of your spiritual ego. What's really important is that you never integrate these hemispheres. You never integrate these two energies. That's what they care about. And so when it comes to the false light being infused into the spiritual community through concepts of a chosen one, what is very important to look for is the discernment in who you're going to and what that person has to gain from creating that content. Because there's many things that are just personal disagreement, and there's many things that are just different people seeing different perceptions. And all of that is organic, and none of that is inherently manipulative. It doesn't need to be manipulative. But then there are some things that are flat out 100%, it doesn't matter which way you're approaching it, which way you're looking at it, deceptive. And that is when content creators are pushing out this narrative of there being a chosen one, because there's 100% shadow reward that's being gained. Very vampirically too. And it has nothing to do with integrity, which is why also what the spiritual community is learning very clearly now within this age is the prostitute archetype. The prostitute archetype is the most important archetype that is coming into our collective awareness right now. Because the prostitute archetype has nothing to do with prostitutes. It is in fact those people who will do anything, no matter how much out of integrity they are, in order to gain either financially or in status or in fame or whatever their shadow wounds are and their motivations are. And what I mean specifically by the prostitute archetype is how desperate a person is, whether they're a content creator, whether they're just a person who's beginning their spiritual awakening, whatever it is, we all embody the different archetypes. We all embody the prostitute archetype to a certain degree. The question becomes, how aware are we going to be of it? And how are we going to express it? Because any archetype, it doesn't matter what archetype it is, can be used in a beneficial and an exalted way. There is always a healthy way to express an archetype. There is always some sort of benefit or advantageous quality that we can use with our awareness consciously, when we're consciously using an archetype, so that we too don't fall into suppression of our own archetypes. But what's the problem with this prostitute archetype is that from this point and before it, everything that's happened from before this age and before this point in time has been done with the prostitute archetype completely at the driver's seat. So we have had leaders in all fields, politics, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what field it is, whether it's politics, whether it's health, whatever it is. It all came from strong egoic energy, which had to do with that desperation. I'll do anything at any cost, no matter what. And that's all the opposite of integrity. So when I'm talking about prostitute, that's all that's being talked about. It has nothing to do with actual prostitutes, because quite frankly, actual prostitutes probably have less of a choice in those life decisions than people who are in the prostitute archetype. But moving forward, no one is actually going to be able to genuinely evolve if they're not actively gaining discernment and if they're not actively becoming aware of the prostitute archetype within them and without them, so that we're able to integrate and we're able to heal the way that this archetype has been at the driver's seat of humanity. And we can come now from a place where we're actually and genuinely located in integrity, rather than whatever I gotta do, whatever trend, whatever's going on. It doesn't matter if it's a false light psyops. It doesn't matter if this is counterintelligence. I'm just gonna use this to spew at my audience type energy. Because it's not only cheap, It's beyond vampiric to be preying on people who are going through spiritual awakening in that way of trying to appeal to their ego by calling them chosen, get them all hyped up and frenzied in an ecstatic state so that they can be U-turned back around into the false light matrix, rather than genuinely be able to integrate their consciousness in a responsible and mature way so that they can understand exactly how advancing in consciousness doesn't actually mean you fragment yourself into ego while you're doing so, while still not demonizing the ego. I hope this has taught you that you're special, but not chosen. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for higher dimensional guidance through spiritual awakening. See you next time.